All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. Brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network, produced by Jules Taylor, and made possible by the support of listeners like you. Working People is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. If you're hungry for more worker and labor-focused shows like ours, follow the link in the show notes and go check out the other great shows in our network. And please support the work that we're doing here at Working People, because we can't keep going without you. Share our episodes with your coworkers, your friends, and family members. Leave positive reviews of the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And reach out to us if you have recommendations for working folks you'd like us to talk to or stories you'd like us to investigate. And please support the work that we do at the Real News Network by going to therealnews.com/donate, especially if you want to see more reporting from the front lines of struggle around the U.S. and across the world. My name is Maximillian Alvarez.
And my name's Mel Buer.
And Mel and I have got a special little update episode for y'all today, and we've got some big announcements regarding the show. Now, in one sense, this is kind of a prelude to a larger celebration that we're going to work on over the summer. As you guys probably noticed, we recently crossed a pretty significant milestone on Working People. In 2024, we officially crossed the 300 episode mark. Since I recorded, edited, and published that very first episode with my dad, Jesus Alvarez, back in 2018, we've been on a wild ride. The show has grown in ways that I frankly never could have imagined back then when I was producing it as a broke grad student with rented equipment from the library. The world has changed in radical, hopeful, terrifying, violent, unpredictable, and in fact, very predictable ways. And my own life has changed in dramatic, beautiful, intense, fortunate, and devastating ways. And the labor movement in this country has undergone incredible changes. And we've done our best to document that change and what it's like to live through this moment in history through the conversations that we've had with workers across industries from all walks of life about their lives, their jobs, their dreams, and struggles. Over the past 7 seasons of the show, I've interviewed working people, young, old, and middle-aged, union and non-union, worker owners at worker cooperatives, workers who were just laid off, workers on strike, workers unionizing, families of workers who were killed by their jobs, indigenous workers living on reservations, workers whose children were murdered in a school shooting, sex workers, academic workers, manufacturing workers, railroad and airline workers, educators, yoga instructors and professional massage therapists, social workers, baristas, journalists, healthcare workers, service workers, construction workers, coal miners, lumberjacks, Amazon workers. I mean, I've interviewed working people in Cuba, Canada, Brazil, Slovenia, Turkey, Myanmar, the UK, France, and more. I've never made any money from this show. You know, we've only ever brought in enough Patreon earnings to pay Jules and to support other independent shows and journalists. And, you know, to be honest, I've struggled and failed to make the show anything resembling a commercial success. But I am incredibly proud of this work. And I'm incredibly excited about where we're going to take the show over the next 300 episodes. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to reflect a bit on how far the show has come and give y'all a sense of where we're going next. But as we annoying journalists love to say, we don't want to bury the lead. And I figured that we should start with the big announcement. That sound good to you, Mel?
That sounds pretty good, I think. I do want to take a small moment if I can leave the audience in suspense for a little bit longer, just to really hammer home what a monumental achievement the last 300 episodes have been of this podcast. Just hearing you talk about the myriad people that you have invited onto this platform to share their stories, their personal struggles, their triumphs, their moments where they have come to know solidarity for the first time is nothing short of amazing. And I know that Working People was sort of born out of this inspiration of what would it be like if Studs Terkel had a podcast. And I think that you have done his memory extremely proud, and the work that you have contributed is there's no understating how important it is. So I just want to just really hammer that home. Congratulations on 300 episodes. That is mind blowing. How cool that is, truly. And fuck it being a commercial success, to be honest, because that's just a small marker in what is a really truly impactful piece of work that you've been working on these last, what, 6 years now? I think that's, incredible. So congratulations, Max. That's so cool.
Thank you, Mel. That really means the world to me, and it's hard, frankly, to wrap my head around it. But just once I start thinking about like all the people that I've met through doing this show, yourself included, right? I mean, like as a fellow podcaster, right? Like that's kind of how our paths eventually intertwined, and that was also what set me on the path, and for us to both end up eventually at the Real News, right? And like when I start thinking about it in those terms, when I start thinking about the people I know, the connections I have, the things that I've learned, the ways that I've developed as a person through this show, then yeah, it really starts to like I really start to get a sense of just kind of like what a monumental undertaking this has been, and how much of a collective effort it's been. I mean, everyone who's ever listened to and shared the show, anyone who's ever recommended the show, or like put in a good word for me so that I could get an interview with someone who had no idea who I was. Just, there are too many people to thank, but truly, if you've ever helped me on this show, if you ever helped me and Jules, if you've ever done anything to help us keep going on this quixotic endeavor, trust me when I say it means the world to us, and we would not be here without you guys. And to sort of kind of build on that, like we were saying, this show, led me and Mel to connect years ago. And as you guys know from this show and the work we've done at the Real News in recent years, that led me and Mel to get really invested in covering the ongoing labor struggle on the nation's railroad system. And, we interviewed countless railroad workers 2 years ago in the midst of their, intense contract fight with the Class 1 rail carriers. We don't have to go over that whole saga. And, I think we all remember what happened. Looked like there was going to be a strike or a lockout, and Biden and Congress conspired to crush a potential rail strike. And then 2 months later, East Palestine, Ohio happens. And as you guys know from listening to our coverage over the past year, our railroad coverage led me directly to East Palestine, and I have not left, frankly. My heart in many ways is still in East Palestine, because you can't hear what those folks are going through. You can't know, all that you know from what, like, the interviews that we've done about how the railroad system has gotten to where it is now, and how we are all in danger and have been put at hazard because of relentless corporate greed and, government under regulation. But these people in East Palestine are the ones paying the price for all that corporate greed. Just like working people across this country are paying the price for corporate greed and deregulation and government disinvestment and the systematic devaluation of labor and life itself. And so I say that all to say is that, as I've, gotten into reporting on the struggles of our fellow workers living in and around East Palestine, Ohio, where the Norfolk Southern train derailed on February 3rd of 2023, this has become something of an obsession of mine. East Palestine led me to investigate more cases of working class folks living and working in what we ghoulishly call sacrifice zones. These are zones, areas where people live where life is becoming unlivable because of industrial pollution, because of contamination from government sites like Department of Defense, Department of Energy, but also areas where, life as we know it is being sacrifice to the elements, and that could also mean, the climate chaos that we're experiencing right now in areas that people inhabit that have just been sort of, given up on, and folks there have been, left to flounder like so many other working people in so many different areas of this country, and so that is really where my focus needs to be, and in order to give that coverage, the focus that it needs, and to do the research, make the contacts, talk to folks living not just in East Palestine, not just in areas like South Baltimore here, where I've been interviewing folks there who are being industrially poisoned by rail companies as well as other polluters, but that has led me to Portsmouth, Ohio, where we also interviewed Vina Cawley, who's a former electrician who worked at the gaseous diffusion plant there and has been fighting for half a century to get her community the recompense that they deserve for the poisoning that's happened there. That led me to Red Hill in Hawaii, and back to Navajo Nation, where the uranium gold rush left generations of indigenous people poisoned and cancer-ridden. That led me to Cancer Alley, Louisiana, where, poor and working class, predominantly black communities are being, systematically sacrificed by industry and their own government. That led me back to West Virginia and the mining and fracking booms that have decimated the livability of some of the most beautiful parts of our country, some of the most beautiful parts of the world where people can't drink the water. Speaking of drinking the water, Flint, people in Flint still don't have water that, they can trust to drink or serve their children coming out of their faucets, to say nothing of Jackson, Mississippi, North Carolina, where PFAS is in basically all of the water, rural parts of Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa, where concentrated animal feeding operations and the off-run of, those operations is contaminating the water and poisoning the environment. Like this issue, this problem is so monumental in scale and so monumental and devastating in terms of the human and non-human impacts that are already being felt across this country, that are being felt across the world. Frankly, Americans have no idea how poisoned we already are. And I feel like I'm at the very beginning of a very long journey into this dark side of our history and our present. And I want to keep talking to working folks living and working and fighting for justice in these areas. I want to help put those communities in touch. I want to help folks understand that this is all of our problem, just as we've tried to do in East Palestine. But that's obviously going to mean that, I can't give that my full attention. I can't juggle, all the responsibilities I'm juggling as editor-in-chief here at The Real News and co-executive director here, and also, continue to cover contemporary shop floor and labor organizing stories, with the full rigor that, I've been able to over, the past seasons. And so that is why why I couldn't be more excited to be bringing Mel onto the show as a co-host we're going to be tag teaming this while I go deeper into our Sacrificed series. And so you can expect a lot more coverage from me in that vein. Mel has graciously agreed to come on the show and really help us, stay on top of, worker and organizer focused interviews that really kind of keep you up to date on the critical labor struggles that are happening all around us right now. I mean, auto worker, union drives in the South, right? And Amazon labor union just affiliated with the Teamsters. I mean, there are huge contracts up for hundreds of thousands of postal workers with the American Postal Workers Union and National Rural Letter Carriers Association. We've got questions about the role unions have played and will continue to play in fighting against war and genocide, what a second Biden or Trump term will mean for the National Labor Relations Board and for unions and for working people in general, how things like AI and climate chaos are reshaping our working and non-working lives, and how working people are fighting back. There's so much here to cover, and I'm so excited that Mel's going to be coming on and helping us, basically bring you guys these two critical areas of coverage on the podcast. And, Mel, I just wanted to kind of like toss it to you and ask if you could, say a little bit, since we're in a reflective mode here. I was wondering, if you could say a little bit about how your own kind of path into labor reporting, has brought you to this point, and what you've seen in the labor world over these past couple years, and what you're really looking forward to covering on this show this year and beyond.
I came into labor reporting because there was a strike in my community in 2021. Kellogg's went out on strike. One of the big manufacturing plants that makes cereal is in Omaha, Nebraska. And I had a unique connection to that plant. I drove past it every single day on the way to school. It was part of our sort of backyard where I grew up. It's always been there. And it was a unique moment to be able to sort of step beyond the gates that we always drove by and see the people who were making the food that we eat. And they were on strike. Prior to that, I was in mostly movement reporting. And I had sort of widening interest in what the labor movement does in the US and how it operates and who benefits and who could benefit. And this was the sort of trial by fire, and I was just freelancing at the time. And Max graciously paid me a decent amount of money to write an article. And I got a chance to, sit down and talk to my literal neighbors about working conditions. And it was a revolutionizing sort of moment for me. And I came to the realization that when I was still living in the Midwest, as you know, I'm living in Los Angeles now, but when I was still living in the Midwest, there was something unique about being able to reach across this perceived union fence, if you will, and to really kind of reach into the lives of folks who really care a lot about the work that they do. And as you know, Max, that is a really radicalizing sort of thing, just to be able to have these conversations with people that you probably wouldn't meet otherwise, and my journey further into labor reporting has led me to all sorts of places, to the middle of Iowa, small towns in Iowa, to talk to railroad workers and to manufacturers of tractors who are on strike, and now I'm on the West Coast, which has unique sort of and vibrant organizing around entertainment and media and fast food workers and healthcare workers and service workers and academic workers, right? And I've been able to kind of see the sort of transformative power that solidarity has on the sort of micro bits of the movement, right? And how they all kind of fit together. And now, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this week and last week's Supreme Court decisions about dismantling the administrative state, essentially, and what that does for the NLRB and how folks are going to react to that within the labor movement and the organizing spheres that I now can sort of like rub elbows with, right? But it's clear to me that as we move farther into sort of worsening material conditions that our latest stage of capitalism has presented to us, that labor organizing is no small part of what it means to sort of build community in the face of that. And I think that in the future, the more earnest conversations that we have about the organizing that is happening right now and the lessons that we can take from both the triumphs and the failures of these both high profile and not so high profile organizing drives and strikes and pickets and all of those things, I think is going to be invaluable information into how we can push back against what I believe to be the fascist creep turn sprint, frankly, in this country. And, imagine new ways that we can participate in the social fabric of this country. And I mean that in a holistic sense, right? That includes the sort of materialist analysis that the communists in the audience would love us to talk about, right? But I really, I in the grand scheme of things, I'm no Kim Kelly. I haven't been writing about labor for 10 years like Sarah Jaffe. You know what I mean? Alex Press has got her, amazing sort of work, but I am hoping to contribute something. And this is where I can be in this sphere, talking about this kind of work. And hopefully putting it not only in the contemporary world that we're living in and helping the audience, our audience now, get outside of themselves and throw open the curtains and be able to see what's outside of your immediate concerns and how your neighbors and community members and people who look and sound and work just like you are taking on this challenge and what we can get out of that. So yeah, I mean, I'm stoked. I was very surprised to get this invite, and I'm very honored, and I feel like this is a very unique privilege to be able to contribute something to a project that I think is very invaluable in our current shithole media landscape. So I don't know. Should I be cussing? Are we putting this on the radio?
No, for right now, we're still a cussing podcast. But that is one of the, things that we want to do moving forward, is we want to get working people on more radio stations. Like parts of the show do end up on the radio through our friends at the Labor Radio Podcast Network. So some of y'all may have found us through the radio, but we want to get this show syndicated on more stations, which may mean that we may have to cut down on the cursing a little, or rely a little more on bleeping. Knowing me and Mel, it'll probably be the latter.
Yeah.
But
incoherent screaming every time we talk about corporations.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most natural thing in the world to cover what we cover and let the expletives fly because, I mean, so much of what we cover is fucked up. But also so much of what we cover is just so astonishingly beautiful and inspiring. And I think that one thing that Mel and I both agree on, and we've talked about, is that, that's the thing that gets us through the really rough days, the days when, the weight of the world itself, as we descend, more into, nakedly corrupt corporate oligarchy and, fascistic gangsterism in our own country, to say nothing of climate chaos and increased war and, around the world. It's a lot. We understand that. Believe us, we're in the news. We work here, and it fucking sucks. And it's really depressing. But the connections that you make with other working people and the stories that you hear, the fight that you see and learn about, and hopefully that we are able to communicate to you guys on this show. I mean, that is where you find hope. And I wanted to kind of just say something about that because I really loved how you we're talking about, like why that matters, and like it really spoke to like where this show came from in the first place. It's funny that over the years, like we've become more known, you and I, as union folks, labor folks, people who are in the know on the organized labor movement, and you get to be that way by reporting on it and learning about it and learning from a lot of other people who told us a lot of stuff that we did not know a few years ago. But like, to be honest, this show, like, it was never meant to be a union show. I didn't know a whole lot about unions when I did that first interview with my dad. As I've talked about many times, like, I didn't have a union job until I was a grad student, and our family was not a union family. And so there was a lot that I had to learn myself about how unions worked, labor law worked, how to report accurately on things like strikes and organizing drives. But going back to that very kind of core idealism of the beginning of this show, like, again, I didn't want to do this show because I wanted to get everyone to join a union, although you should join a union, and if you don't have one to join, you should start one. But I started the show from a much more basic place. I started this show because of what was happening to my family, because of what I myself was going through, and we were all going through in the Great Recession. And the not only the economic hardships, not only losing our house, not only working any low wage jobs we could just to try to kind of keep what we had, but also just the deep soul rot that comes with that, that comes with living in a country that will throw all of its resources around protecting the big banks while letting millions of families like mine just fall through the cracks and lose everything, right? Living in a country where in most states you can get fired just because the boss doesn't like your face, right, or who you are as a person, and most people don't even know they have rights in the workplace, let alone the courage or wherewithal, or frankly the practical ability to exercise them in the workplace. Like, that's where the show grew out of, is from that general condition that so many working people are in this country, and the ways that just sort of, like, we start to convince ourselves that we're worth that we're worth as little as the system tells us we're worth, that we're worth as little as we get paid, that we're as small as the customers and managers who berate us lead us to believe, and that the society leads us to believe. That's why I started the show, is because I wanted working people to believe that they were worth more than their lot in life in this shithole society. I wanted my dad to not go to his grave feeling like a failure, and to not feeling alone. And that was really just the star that guided me through, from the beginning to now. I've learned a lot since then, but that's really what it's all about. And like, that's where you naturally end up reporting more on organizing efforts, whether they be union efforts or non-union efforts to, lead a walkout, right? Or, to form a worker cooperative. There are many ways that working people can organize and fight to change their circumstances. But what I have found just endlessly inspiring and heroic in the stories that we've covered on this show, the stories that Mel has covered at The Real News, is just that, like, effort, that decision by working people to say, I'm not going to accept this, and this is unacceptable, and I'm going to do something to change my circumstances rather than just roll over and accept whatever the bosses and the powers that be give me. Like, I did not know that I had more options as a low-wage worker than just staying at my job and sucking it up, or quitting and trying to find something else. I really didn't. And that's why I will always find it so incredible whenever I talk to another working person who, along with their coworkers, has made that jump to say, no, we're going to do something about this in our workplaces. And when it starts there, but the more that you start to organize and work with your fellow workers and build power and fight through adversity and build solidarity, like you start to realize the power that working people have collectively, and you start fighting to build more of it beyond the shop floor. And in fact, if we can work and organize to change our circumstances at our jobs, we can do the same in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our apartment buildings, in our cities, our towns, country, and beyond. Like, it's that spark of getting yourself to believe that you are the change you've been waiting for. That is the spark of hope that you hear throughout this show, throughout the struggles of our fellow workers across the world. And like, that's the thing that Mel and I have seen, that, yeah, even though we didn't get formal training in journalism school, or, you know, like weren't trained as union organizers or what have you, like, that's the thing that we follow. And we learn so much from the stories that people tell us.
I think it's also important to note that what we're talking about is really simple. We live in a society that everyone, you can feel the sort of, as the materialists like to say, the alienation, the atomization of people. You feel like you're walled off from yourself. You feel like you're walled off from your family, from your neighbors, from the people that you go to school with, from your coworkers, and it is a wholly isolating, lonely experience to be a working person, a member of the working class in the Western world, surrounded by distraction, surrounded by rampant sort of consumerism that is purpose built to sort of take your eye line elsewhere from the problems that are causing such deep, troubling experiences within yourself. And, to anyone who's organized even a potluck with your neighbors for 4th of July, there is something about that feeling of being connected to someone outside of yourself, outside of your immediate circle, that is absolutely intoxicating, right? And building that sort of solidarity, whether you're in a union or you're deciding to march on the boss who's stealing your tips, or you collectively assert your sort of humanity within the workplace or outside of the workplace. It's once you get a small taste of what that can feel like, you never want to go back to whatever nightmare you were living before. And I think, in my short time, the last couple of years, 3 years or so, reporting on the labor movement and talking particularly in the Midwest, talking to workers who are either organizing union drives or out on the picket line, they've never experienced a sit down with someone on a different shift at the same job before, right? Where they had the time to sit together in front of, a fire barrel, and just talk about life. And you realize that their kids go to the same school, or, you may have gone to the same softball games, or, you attend the same church. You just had no idea that you also worked in the same place and you were experiencing the same sort of harrowing working conditions. And now the two of you from first shift and second shift are sitting on a picket line, and you get to have that moment where you get to reach across just these gulfs of relation, where you have this void to be able to build that. So when we talk about building community, when we talk about solidarity, and when we talk about mutual aid, these aren't these like theoretical concepts that leftists like to throw out into the ether when we're talking about how to respond to the sort of nightmare conditions that are being perpetuated by people who have amassed massive power in this country. These are real concepts, and you do them every day, whether you think you do or not. And if you put a little bit more effort into it, I'm going to get off my soapbox here in a second, but if you really try to like reach through whatever fear you have about organizing, about talking to your coworkers, about talking to your neighbors, about going to, a community event, and just reach through whatever fear and anxiety you have about it, and actually try and meet people where they're at, you'll find that they're trying to do the same thing, and you have a lot more in common than you think. And that is what the powers that be, whatever you want to call it, are fucking scared of. They don't want that to happen, because that really is a truly powerful moment. And that little bit of euphoria that you feel is magnified, right? Fucking a million times over. And I don't know. I think that it's really, for my part, kind of sitting as like a quote outsider in the media. I'm sure, Max, you feel this as well. We still feel that warmth, you know, what the sunlight of solidarity can do. And we have these skills as journalists, as podcasters, whatever you want to call us, media individuals. And we hope to share those stories so that more people can understand that, you know, sometimes all it takes is just hearing about someone similar to you doing something that maybe you were too afraid to or didn't know that you could do. So hopefully that's what we can do with this podcast. And hopefully I can kind of provide one way in which, you know, examples of one way in which to build that sort of power in your community. I'm off my soapbox. So that's all I got.
Hell yeah. No, hopefully about it, baby. I know you're gonna, and it's gonna be incredible. And I'm super excited. Like, again, started this show, you know, in my, you know, dinky little apartment in Ann Arbor, like never knowing that we, you know, make it to 300 episodes, let alone that we be talking about the next 300. So like, even just the fact that we're here now, bringing you on as co-host is just, you know, like really, really exciting for me. And I hope our listeners are just as excited. And I hope that you guys are just as excited as Mel and I are about how we're going to be able to grow the show in this way. And I wanted to sort of round out by kind of talking about that, like, you know, places we want to go and appeals we want to like send to our listeners right now, because we want you guys to reach out to us. We want to make this show always what is the most useful for you as you know, struggle to get what you're worth, right? And to fight for a future worth living in for yourselves, for all of us, for our children, right? And so we want this show to be that resource. We want it to be a place where you can feel that solidarity, where you can learn about struggles that your fellow workers are going through that you know, you didn't know others were going through. You're learning about how they and their coworkers are fighting and fighting and winning, or when they are fighting and losing. What can we learn from those experiences? How do we keep the struggle going? And we want to hear from you guys about the kinds of working people you want us to talk to here in the U.S. and around the world. Like this show has been growing internationally as well, and that's certainly, like, we want to continue that growth on this show and at The Real News. So like we are all ears, and as you guys know from the past 300 episodes, right, whether we're talking explicitly about a strike or whether we're more talking about a person's life and the work that they do, or something that they and their community are going through, even if we're not necessarily talking about their jobs, but they're still working class people, you know, dealing with the realities of working class life, you know, like here in capitalist America. Like, I mean, we try to take a really broad scope here in trying to cover, you know, again, the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of our fellow workers, wherever those stories may lead. And so, Mel, I just wanted to like ask, like if you had like any sort of prompts or ideas that you wanted to kind of just toss out to the audience about what you are going to be looking into, or what sort of areas you're excited to expand into, or like the kinds of folks you want to reach out to us.
A bit of a broad sort of ask for me. Not only do I want to hear about the picket lines, the strikes, the contract negotiations, the minutia around organizing drives, you know, the various things that are kind of the capital U union sort of news. Doesn't matter where it is. If it's in SoCal, I'll see you in person. You know, if it's elsewhere in the country or in the world, let's get on Zoom and let's talk about it. My email will be in the description of this episode, it's Mel, M-E-L, at therealnews.com. Send me an email. Even if you think it might not be a story, I guarantee you it's interesting to me and it will be interesting to our audience. So talk to me about that. But not only do I want that, I want to hear about the sort of small triumphs that maybe you as a union member or you as a labor adjacent person or someone who was affected by some sort of moment of solidarity around the labor movement in your community. Hit us up about that. You know, did a union hold a fundraiser for someone who was ill? You know, did you have a really fun softball tournament that allowed you to kind of reach out and start to build these bonds of solidarity between union locals? You know, it doesn't matter. You know, if it seems minor, it's likely not. But what I am hoping is that we can kind of build this conversation around not only just like the sort of quote unquote official contemporary labor struggles in the United States and elsewhere, but to also kind of, again, draw the curtain back on what it means to be a union member, what it can do for your life, who it can affect in your life or around your life, and what that community looks like, especially if you're a union member who really feels that sort of community. Let's talk about it. And let's give folks ideas on how to build something in their own backyard, you know? And if you're, and this is just a offhand ask, and it's not really something that I'm expecting will come through my email. But if you're a freaking labor historian nerd and you want to talk about an anniversary coming up, or you have, you know, you can draw these parallels between, say, Amazon delivery drivers and some obscure Teamsters fact that you know from 100 years ago, hit me up. Let's talk about it. You know, let's really try and build this place to be one of the many podcasts that kind of helps us demystify what it means to be a member of the labor movement in the United States and to be part of an international sort of coalition that really builds international solidarity. Let's talk about it. And again, my email is mel@therealnews.com. Do not send me a DM on social media. I won't read it. My Twitter DMs are closed. You just got to send me an email, or, you know, you can hit me up and ask for my signal number and we'll get on the phone and talk about it. All right. That's my ask. Thank you.
Oh yes. All right, gang. Reach out to us and like again, we want to make this show more interactive too, right? I mean, send us voice messages. We always include a link to our digital voicemail service in the show notes. We always want to hear from you. What we'd love to do, and I've expressed this desire in seasons past. Like, I'd love to start each episode playing a listener submitted, you know, a voicemail, like either thoughts that you have on a previous show, updates about what's going on in your neck of the woods or in your workplace or at your union local. You know, just I think, yeah, like the more that we can get more of y'all's voices on the show, we'd love hearing from you, even if it's just, you know, like sharing your thoughts about an episode, your critiques, your suggestions. We want to hear from you. So please, yeah, reach out to Mel, reach out to me, and give us story ideas, let us know your thoughts, but also, yeah, please send in voice messages. If you are so inspired to, you know, make a piece of art after hearing a story that one of our interviewees has shared, like, share it with us and we'll share it with our audience as well on our social media accounts and all that good stuff. We do want to keep making the show as interactive as possible. We want to hear from you guys, and I'm so yeah, excited to hear the episodes that result from, you know, what you guys send in to Mel and the things that she's already investigating. And for my part, as I said, you know, like, I want to give this Sacrifice Zone series my full attention, not just because, you know, in many ways every Sacrifice Zone's different. In other ways, they are eerily similar, or the conditions that working people are left in, the things that the bureaucracy that they have to navigate, the lack of legal recourse that they have, the symptoms that they're developing sadly, a lot of those are very similar. But it's important to, if I'm going to do this series justice, if I'm going to do the folks that we talk to justice, like with East Palestine, like I'm going to have to really learn as much as I can about the specifics of each community, the sources of their pollution or their larger sacrifice. Like I said, I want to expand our understanding of sacrifice zones to not just include areas where people live near heavy industry, but to also include, zones where, life is becoming unlivable because of government sources of pollution, right? I mean, one of the most consistent sources of PFAS contamination are military bases across the country. And as I already mentioned, like the way that climate chaos is continues to, get more and more chaotic. And as we were discussing with the great journalist Mike Fox recently, I mean, like this is already impacting, poor and working people across the globe. It's already turning millions into climate refugees, making, like their sources of food and water and their livelihoods unsustainable where they live, where they're from, where their roots are. And that's, I think, one of the real kind of crucial reasons that I can't move away from this series is because I think that in our imaginations, right, we tend to think of, again, working class people and working struggles and labor struggles in one bucket, and then like, climate disaster and pollution, industrial pollution, and these other sorts of things in another bucket. But as Mike Fox and I talked about in that episode about the floods in Brazil, it's like, who do you think is living in these communities? They are our fellow workers. They are people that you probably go to work with, or that you yourself, like are experiencing this. Like the fact that you go work one place and you may be getting polluted or poisoned at work, does not negate, the struggle that you and your fellow workers are going through at home when you're being blasted with toxic chemicals or coal dust, or there are contaminants in the water coming out of your faucet that your children are bathing in. Like, I mean, the struggles of working class people, right, do not begin and end on the shop floor. And so again, that's why Mel and I are going to really be trying to do a full court press on these two key areas of coverage to give you guys as broad of a swath of coverage as we can on the realities of living and working in modern day America and beyond. And I just wanted to say another, by way of rounding out, just what I hope really comes across to folks in the reporting that we've already done for this sacrifice series, primarily on East Palestine and Portsmouth and South Baltimore. But as we continue to go down this road, and in fact, this is going to be the focus of my next book of interviews is working people living in different sacrifice zones. And the reason that I felt this was, this justified not only committing myself to it in this podcast series, but for another book, is because East Palestine, Ohio, as we know, is not an anomaly. Like many other poor communities in this country, especially Black, brown, indigenous, and colonized communities, they already know what it means to be sacrificed. And they have long been familiar with life on the Great American Chopping Block. And, other white and mixed working class communities have felt it too. And increasingly, more communities across this country are learning what that feels like. As I already said, 4 hours away from East Palestine for the past 4 decades, as you guys heard in our interview with Vina Colley, it's been people working and living near the Portsmouth gaseous diffusion plant in Pike County. And that's one of Ohio's poorest counties. In Navajo Nation, it has been generations of Dene people poisoned by the Cold War uranium mining gold rush, and who are now being doubly squeezed by climate change and the not so slow moving water crisis in the Southwest, to say nothing of hundreds of years of violent settler colonial domination. in Cancer Alley, Louisiana, between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, it's the majority black parish communities that have been poisoned by the petrochemical plants surrounding their homes. And that includes the coastal communities where people's homes and ways of life are already in the process of being sacrificed as the climate crisis intensifies. In Hawaii, where the U.S. military owns 200,000 acres of land across the islands, it's the military, native and non-native people living and working in Honolulu near the Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility, a U.S. Navy facility that has been leaking fuel and poisoning the local water supply for the past decade and probably a lot longer than that. And across the Cape Fear River Basin between Fayetteville and Wilmington in North Carolina, it's communities of people connected by the same waterways that are just teeming with PFAS, that's coming from multiple sources. So why am I going, so deep into this? Because, as I said, it's not just East Palestine. It's so many other communities. And, accepting the wholesale sacrifice of communities like East Palestine, like South Baltimore, that in itself should be, in every sense of the word, unacceptable. And yet, in the good old US of A, not only has it been accepted as a thing that corporations, shareholders, and policymakers can get away with, but after 40 plus years of runaway deregulation, public disinvestment, and capitalist domination, America's sacrifice zones are no longer extreme outliers. They are, in my estimation, a harrowing model of the future that lies in stores for most of us, especially as the world, continues to spiral further into climate chaos and bringing all the economic, political, and humanitarian crises that come with that. And if these corporate monsters, corporate politicians, and Wall Street vampires poisoning our communities aren't stopped, that's where we're all headed. And it's going to be us, the ones directly in the path of all this reckless and preventable destruction, working people fighting as one who are going to stop them. I believe that in my heart, and I see it in the folks that I'm talking to. And we've got to fight with everything that we've got, because the depth of pain and injury being inflicted on all of us right now, our people, our planet, it is impossible to communicate in raw numbers. And because something fundamental in our society and our economy needs to change, and yet we find ourselves in a situation, as Mel said, where the ruling corporate, financial, military, and political classes just currently have our society's collective foot slammed on the gas, barreling in the wrong fucking direction towards more death, more war, more global warming, more unfathomable and preventable misery, and more sacrifice. And because we have to fight to get what we deserve. And frankly, we deserve so much better than this. And that has always been the message of this show. And I am so incredibly grateful to everyone who has stuck with us over these past 300 plus episodes, these past 7 seasons. Everyone who has been patient with me and with Jules, as we've been struggling to keep the show going while keeping our lives going, and jobs and relationships and deaths in the it's your support has really meant the world to me and to us. I just can't thank you guys enough for listening, for caring, for sharing these episodes, sharing the stories of these great folks that have given us their time and shared their life stories so openly with us. That is ultimately what it is all about. And you guys listening to those stories, sharing them, learning from them, like that's the greatest gift that any one of us can give to one another is listening and seeing each other for our whole human selves when, we trust each other enough to open up the way that people open up on this show. And so I wanted to, really end by thanking you guys, the listeners, the folks who have stuck with us from the beginning, the folks who have found us somewhere in the middle or even recently. Like, thank you for keeping this show going. Thank you for keeping us going even when we wanted to quit. And thank you for constantly inspiring us by fighting for a better world wherever you are. Thank you.